Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. We're doing another video in the other boat, which is fun, right? A little bit windy, a little bit of storm coming in, and apparently airplanes flying overhead. I don't know if you can hear that or not. I want to talk a little bit about. So this is not a bitch session, a complaining session, but it kind of might come across that way. There's this big space in the boating world, the cruising world, and I think so on the one hand, it's the dying of recreational sailing or whatever it is, right? You've got a lot of people with a lot of money who want to go really fast and keep all of the coolness to themselves. All right, yacht club people, marina people, private waterfront people. They think that they can own the ocean, the navigable waterways, restrict entry so that the poor people don't get in. All of that. Those people have always been around, but there's always been like in the past there's been a certain amount of respect for people whose livelihood or lifestyle is on the water. So I've been to many bars with people who are insanely much richer than me while living on a boat in rather poor conditions, but making the life on the boat, making the life about being a sailor or a mechanic or whatever I'm doing at the time. And that's there's a crossing of the boundaries there that's pretty common, and but there are people coming into the world who don't have that. They don't have that idea. They don't have um honestly, they don't even have a respect for their own engineers. They'll have a 42-foot power cruiser with two 600 horsepower engines and piss on the guy who changes their oil. And that's a little bit more risky than looking down your nose at your mechanic for your Audi. Okay, it's a little bit of a different situation. So there's that. There's this whole culture thing. There's a lot of people who are buying waterfront houses and want to have no people in their backyards, which is the river, the navigable waterway, the bay. This is actually a pretty big deal, and there's a lot of fights, and the fights are being won by the money in some places. Like there's places where you can't anchor in a natural anchorage because you might be 500 yards from somebody's back porch or something, and we're talking like 500 yards. We're really seriously quarter mile. There they get mad, and I I don't know what to say about that. Um, it does change the marketplace, but also the habits of people who do boating. Sailing is a rich man's sport, is what they say, but that's never been true. It's high performance, new, fancy sailing has always been kind of a rich man's sport. You can get by on a smaller sailboat and cruise for 2 months. Take a summer vacation. You're a teacher. You've got 7 weeks off. You can go be on a boat for that whole time on nearly minimum wage and do just fine. That there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want a brand new 42-foot catamaran, you're spending $800,000 minimum, like for new. That's how it goes. People have $500,000 25-foot center console boats with 3 outboards, 4 outboards. There's that whole space there, and we're kind of missing something as the world advances. We've discovered that we can make boats that last for 100 years quite easily. Not even close to a problem. Okay, a fiberglass boat, 100 years, no problem. Plenty of them are more than 50 years old now and do just fine. No issues with the hull. The fiber reinforced plastic, GRP, FRP, whatever you want to call it, the glass reinforced plastic, GRP, is wonderful stuff. And it will last forever if you take just a little bit of care of it, or repair it, or recoat it, or do whatever. And it's great. Um, so you've got a lot of older boats, and that's kind of part of the problem, because boats used to be recycled through nature. Like, wooden boats just don't last as long unless they are cared for. The survival rate, any wooden boat can last forever, but the survival rate is more like 1%, because after about 20 years most people have got a rotted hull, just the way it goes. I'll see fishing boats, work boats out here that are 35, 40 years old, but they've had a lot of replacement, like the whole bottom, maybe the top sides, all of the interior. None of the interior woodwork is going to be original at that point. They're basically rebuilt at that point, and they're work boats, not pleasure craft. So they live a hard life. So trying to develop a theme here. So hear me out and listen to this. What we have is we have a lot of people pushing the ends of boating to privacy, non-access, some sort of idea of owning the water, but also owning access to the water. Okay. At the same time, we have a lot of people who can afford toys. Trailerable boats are more affordable than ever, but they're not cruising boats usually. You're looking at kind of a different thing. There's an increase in people who camp using trailerable boats, like little 21 foot the Grady White overnighter is a great example. But the little 21, 25 footers that have a little V berth in there, and people will spend a week on the river or in a lake or something. Some people will even go down the coast, do the ICW or the Gulf ICW in those. It's doable. It's possible. You can do the Florida Loop, Okeechobee Waterway, and the Keys. If you've got marina money, that's actually the way to do that, because anchoring those out in the wrong conditions can be really rough. But we're lacking the market space for something that a lot of people want. This is a very common thing. A lot of people express a desire for inexpensive, efficient, relatively slow power boats, trawlers, whatever you want to call them, displacement hulls in that 30, 28, 26, 32, 35, 40 foot range, but less expensive, without all of the gadgetry, the modern accessories and stuff that drive the price up from a $30,000 hull, a $10,000 engine install, and finish the interior yourself, to $800,000. Just bang, 42-foot power cruiser, live aboard style, $800,000, maybe $300,000 for one of these smaller trailerable ones. And I think there are some trailerable trawlers in the 32-foot range, around 300, maybe 180, but nothing that's going to hit you at a cheaper price point. Used boats are very cheap, but the fact that the market, which has been for at least 20 years demanding this stuff, doesn't get this stuff is a problem. So problem one, the people who want to spend the money don't tend to buy that, be the people who want to have slower boats. They don't have the idea of boating in that sense. They're not shippy people. They're just not shippy people. Number two, one-off builds, which are really, really prevalent in this space and really easy to do well, are very frowned upon. They're almost impossible to insure, so that's a problem. You have insurance problems, you have docking problems, you have going around problems, and so there's no used market. There's no culture around it, and that's kind of a strange thing, because you'd expect to see a lot more of it because there's a demand. The demand doesn't match the money of new prices. And that's where, the Swedish used to have an answer to that with some of the smaller albans where you had smaller motor or motor sailors. Some of the hulls would do sail or cruiser, and you could make it do both. That were inexpensive and designed for middle class families to afford. We don't do that, and it's kind of an interesting hole in the market. To be fair, the people they're trying to sell to, people are being trained to look for 40-mile-an-hour cruise, 60-mile-an-hour top speeds, not for displacement hulls, because no one has time for a displacement hull. I mean, you're on the water, it doesn't matter, you're boating, so what difference does it make? But that's how it goes. So no one's filling that middle class market space, which used to be a thing. And I don't, I see the market pressure. I see people really, really wanting this. And I really think that the answer to that, despite the fact that I'm looking at a power cruiser right now, I'm working on it and trying to see if it's going to be permanent. I really think sailboats are going to continue to fill that niche, but that people are going to have to come up with some engineering ideas, plans, simple modifications, and just make it work with the limited modifications that you need to turn it into kind of a power trawler. And so in the van life world, the school bus world, schoolies, van life, there are people who do conversions. There are people who you can hire to help you or do the whole conversion with you or just help you do it. And I really feel like there's a space for that is going to grow. I think people are going to do this soon a lot more. A space where people are going to take and cut 10, 15 feet off the mast, make it into a mast assist kind of boat, get it under 30 feet bridge clearance, raise the house, change the interior cabins so that you have more space to live in, and really, really just turn things around, make the cockpit. So on the Catalina 27, for example, our current sail craft, if we were to raise the cockpit sole, so it comes down like that, right? You've got the seats up here, the actual top deck is up here, and then you've got the footwell, which is only a couple feet wide, and just kind of you sit there with your feet down. If you were to raise that so it was completely flush all the way across, then the rear space back there would actually make a sleeping cabin, especially on this boat because there's no internal motor, no engine inside. It's an outboard well. So if you were to raise that, and that's not super expensive, it's not super complicated, it's a couple $100 of 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch marine plywood and a couple $100 of epoxy and paint, fiberglass, matte epoxy paint. You put that in, cut everything around it, then you raise the cabin in part, make a little pilot house. It's another couple $100. You're not spending that much money. And then you have a door with actual stair access. Everything gets way better, and you can have a stand-up steering station inside or a stand-up steering station outside. And you've just changed the layout of the boat completely. You've done a lot of work that you can do very simply, very easily, and then you can just kind of mess with it and work on it. It would increase the windage of the boat, so that makes the 6 horsepower sailing motor, seahorse, sail master, whatever motor, not appropriate for this boat, but your 10 horsepower motor is still going to do fine. If you really want to power it, you can go get a 15 horse. Your fuel consumption is going to be up a little bit, but you can put a little more water tankage in and drop the mast down significantly. You don't want to drop the mast down too much because you still have a keel. And the center of balance and how the boat moves is going to get way off if you don't do something about that balance. You've put more weight on top of the boat. You've raised the center of your gravity in the cockpit. You've raised the pilot house. You've put a couple 100 pounds up top with, you know, plywood and solar panels and stuff. But you still need a mast. You can't get rid of the mast, especially if you want to have good motion at sea and you're still 4 foot draft. You could probably cut a foot off of the keel, depends on the boat type, and lighten the boat a little bit and make it a little different. I don't think you really need to do that. That seems like an excessively complicated thing, because I really feel like you could do this with just shortening the mast, like dramatically shortening the mast. Some boats, depends on the boat, maybe adding a second mast. It depends on where you're going to be able to deck step it, but making a schooner or a ketch build, this isn't actually rocket science. You can do that. Lots of boats have been re-rigged. You just figure out the sail area and you balance it, and it all works out. But shorten the mast. In this case, I would go with 15 feet. Even though you're raising the pilot house and that reducing that sail area, I think if you went 15 feet on the mast, pulled that down, redid your spreaders, you would have a low foresail, and you could run a lug or a modified lug or a modified gaff rig for the main and get a little bit more sail area for downwind sailing. You're not going to go upwind as well, but that's kind of the point, is that you're not trying to be the most efficient racing sailboat. You're trying to be a efficient power cruiser. So go where you want, when you want, and use the sails to help with the motion and the anchoring and, get home sails, stuff like that. You'll still probably get 4 knots out of sailing if you're in favorable conditions. You won't get 5.5, but you'll get 4. You might get 4.5. But I really feel like there's a space for this to work in. What we lack is a common aesthetic in design. So that's one thing that we lack. We lack a kind of common set of materials or habits or practices, best practices, a way that people do it. And the Catalina 27 is a perfect boat to do this with. If my Substack suddenly got 100 subscribers, actual paid subscribers, that would make all the difference. I would probably start doing that on the Catalina and purchase this thing and make it into a seasonal cruiser while I'm working on the other one, whatever. But I feel like this is an okay model to get to. You want to pick the boats. I don't think there's any boat you can't really do this to, and maybe I wouldn't go shorter than a 25 Capri 26. I don't think I would do it to a Capri 26. There's a reason. It's too good as a micro cruiser as it's built. But I really feel like you could make this work very well with modifications and making some changes without doing too much structural work. People just say that it's worthless because you will never get your money out of it. Or, if you're going to spend $5,000 making the boat better, why don't you just go get a different boat? But are you ever going to get another boat that burns a half a gallon an hour to do 5 knots up and down the ICW? That's a question. It's a really important question, on the bigger side, say you're looking at an older Catalina 36. You're talking about something that's going to burn 3/4 of a gallon, 2/3 of a gallon to go 6 knots, 6.5 knots up and down the ICW. That's pretty fast when you're moving continuously for hours, right? So maybe it's worth it for that. I really feel like we're going to have an increase in working liveaboard populations, working cruise aboard populations, people who are going to just make it work, figure out ways to do this, because housing markets are kind of in a crazy place. And a lot of people have decided that they like the idea of being mobile, seasonally mobile, weekend mobile, whatever. And there's not actually that much of a shortage of places to be if you don't have to be in a downtown city district. Like there are marinas where you cannot get a slip without a 5-year waiting list. But just down the road, an hour, there's marinas that have half their slips empty and are going broke. There's opportunity there, and that's because the old people are kind of dying off, and there's no one replacing that style of yacht club, yacht vacation kind of life. They're too remote, they're too campy, they're too non-nightclubby or whatever. So I don't know. I really think there's a space here. There's a whole lot of things going on. There's a whole lot of places you can go up and down. The Mississippi watershed is huge. There's room for another, I mean, seriously, there's room for 10,000 cruisers in that Mississippi watershed without having to deal with any infrastructure problems like gas pumps, marina slips, overcrowded anchorages. There's plenty of room. It's just there's no one's doing it, and there's not a lot of boats that are appropriate. You know, I'm really thinking about that because I really think that there's a space, this void in boating, and it's just kind of an interesting one for me. So long, rambling, maybe pointless video, but go look at some of those $3,000 sailboats out there, and you know it's an engine with some fiberglass around it, but really give it some thought. Like, what does it take? What would it take to do an easy re-rig? I know everyone on the internet is going to tell you that if you don't have a naval architect and you don't spend $10,000 getting this proper plan with all the tests and the water flow diagrams and everything, you're going to die in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Even if you sail on a lake in Kentucky, you're going to die in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and their body's going to wash up in Nova Scotia. And it's all going to be because you put the wrong size sail on your boat. No, it's not. It's fine. We've been sailing for thousands of years, and the basics are pretty basic, and you can always shorten a mast and re-rig. There are actually people, famous old boat designers and cruisers from the last century, who ran aground in South America and had to rebuild, re-rig a boat out of what was available and then sail home with their families. This happens. It's not that hard, okay? It's not rocket science, you know? A basic understanding goes a very long way. So, something to think about. You know, that $3,000 boat, if go get the mast craned out, take it down, cut it up, redo your spreaders and stuff, just remount them a little lower down. Don't worry about it. You're not going to have it nearly as much stress on the mast, so it's not as critical that you find everything to the 1/2 of a degree. Put it back up, rip off your cabin roof and shoop, make it taller. Take your cockpit, make it taller, and then see where you're at. Do the interior after that. You don't have to plan everything out in advance either. I really think there's a space for this. I'd really like to do more of this. Like, it's an enjoyable thing for me to work on boats and take a chainsaw. I have taken a chainsaw to fiberglass in the past, and it's enjoyable. I like laying up glass and sculpting. Like, this is a very sculpturally oriented kind of task. You don't want to build a square box and then put fiberglass over it. You kind of want to mold yourself, and you've got structural foam board and all sorts of stuff you can do now. So, I don't know. Give it some thought. That's all. Stay sideways.